My name is Madison Claire Harlow. When my father sued me in open court to cover my sister's failed law school loans, I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and handed the judge my copy of the signed investor deal for my $100 million culinary brand. The look on my father's face as the judge ruled in my favor, that was my closure. But let me take you back to the night I knew he'd never believed in me. Where are you watching from? Type your city in the comments. I want to know where my story's reaching hearts. It happened over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. We were all seated around the table in our home in West Houston, my father, Glenn Harlow, sipping his iced tea while half listening to the evening news, my mother, Linda, silently passing the rolls like a worn-out waitress, and my sister Kayla, 2 years older and eternally smug, scrolling through her phone between bites. I'd rehearsed the words all week. I'd even typed them out and deleted them 3 times. "Dad, can I talk to you about school?" My voice shook despite how calm I tried to sound. He didn't even glance up. "This is school-related," he sighed, as if I were about to tell him I'd broken the TV or crashed his truck. "I got into UT's engineering program," I said, pushing the acceptance letter across the table toward him. "Top 10%. They've offered partial aid, but I'd need help with tuition to cover the rest." I wanted to ask if, he let out a breath so slow and theatrical it felt rehearsed. "Madison, there's just no room in the budget, honey. No room, not congratulations, not we'll see what we can do, just a flat, practiced, sterile dismissal." I felt the words crash into my ribs before they reached my brain. "So I'm just supposed to throw away my dreams?" He folded his napkin with surgeon-like precision and set it beside his plate. "Cooking school will be enough for you." Kayla snorted into her glass of sparkling water. My mother kept passing the green beans, her eyes fixed on a spot just past my left shoulder like she wasn't even in the room. "What?" I couldn't keep my voice from rising. "You think I'm not smart enough for engineering?" "I think," he said, still not looking at me, "that you need to be realistic. You've always been good in the kitchen. Stick to what you're good at." "Stick to?" I stood up so fast my chair screeched. "Kayla's going to New York for law school. That's not realistic. That's not expensive." Dad looked up now, slow and cold. "That's different." "How is it different?" "Because Kayla has potential." The silence after that was louder than my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at my mother, but she just kept shaking her head like this was some tragic soap opera she couldn't stop watching. Kayla was full-on smirking now, pretending not to look entertained. "I earned this," I whispered, my throat dry. "I got in on my own. I worked every night for this. You said if I proved myself—" "I said we'd talk, we talked." That's when something in me cracked. Not snapped, not shattered, just cracked, quiet and clean like a hairline fracture in a glass. "Well, I'm going anyway," I said. "Even if I have to work 5 jobs." "Don't be dramatic," he muttered. "You'll thank me one day when you're not drowning in student debt from chasing some fantasy." I clenched my fists until my fingernails dug crescents into my palms. "It's not a fantasy, it's mine." He turned back to his TV. "You'll see." My sister raised her glass toward me like a mock toast. "To chef school, hope they teach you how to take criticism." I didn't cry that night. I took my plate to the sink, scraped the food I suddenly couldn't taste into the trash, rinsed it like everything was normal. But inside, I made a promise, not to prove him wrong. To prove to myself that I was never the small life they assigned me. And that promise, it starts here. 2 days after the dinner table disaster, the silence in our house was worse than any argument. No one spoke of what happened, not at breakfast, not while Dad skimmed the newspaper in the morning, and not when Kayla pranced around humming some Taylor Swift song like nothing had happened. But everything had changed for me. I didn't stop thinking about the words. "Kayla has potential." As if I didn't. As if I were just a lump of dough waiting to rise into a wife, a helper, a shadow. It was Sunday afternoon. Dad was in the study, door cracked open like always when he was making important calls. I was heading down the hall to the laundry room when I heard his voice shift from flat to proud. "Oh yeah," he said, chuckling. "Just wired it Friday morning, 300 grand clean. It's all locked in for Kayla's JD program. NYU doesn't take chances on nobodies, you know." I froze mid-step. 300,000. My stomach flipped. I pressed closer to the wall, heart thudding, hardly breathing. His voice carried like he wanted the whole neighborhood to know what a generous father he was. "No, no, she's gonna be huge," he continued. "Corporate law, real estate, whatever she wants. She's got the mind for it, way more strategic than her sister." Silence, then laughter. His laughter, that was the knife. I didn't wait for more. I stepped into the room without knocking. He turned, phone still in hand. "I'll call you back," he muttered, lowering it with a frown. "Madison, do you mind?" 300,000, I said flatly. "For Kayla." He blinked. "You were eavesdropping. You left the door open." He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his shirt. "That's not your business. You told me there wasn't any money, that the budget was too tight, that cooking school was all I deserved." He didn't flinch, not even a twitch. "I didn't say deserved, I said practical. You think it's practical to spend a house-sized fortune on someone who posts champagne brunches and designer handbags on Instagram like it's a job?" His jaw tightened. "Kayla is focused. Kayla flunked her first undergrad semester, twice. She pulled it together." "You mean you pulled it together with your wallet?" He stepped closer. "You're young, you don't understand the real world yet. Some people need more support." "More lies, you mean." He crossed his arms. "Kayla is built for bigger things. You need to stay grounded. Don't try to compete with her. You'll only disappoint yourself." It hit me harder than I thought it would. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. "Not here, not in front of him." "That's what you really think of me," I said quietly. "I'm not worth the investment." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I walked out. Straight to my bedroom. Threw my suitcase onto the bed and started packing the essentials. Hoodies, jeans, my chef's knives. The acceptance letter I'd folded and tucked in my journal. The last piece of me that still believed my father might come around. I didn't even shut the drawers. I didn't care. Half an hour later, I was at the front door when my mother finally noticed. "Where are you going?" she asked, arms crossed, voice sharp but her eyes weary. "Aunt Teresa said I could stay with her in Austin." "You're just running off." I turned to her, one hand on the doorknob. "I'm not running, I'm choosing, there's a difference." "Your father meant well." "No, he meant what he said." Her mouth opened, closed, she didn't argue. Behind her, Kayla appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her fuzzy robe. "Is this like a dramatic exit or something?" I didn't answer. I stepped outside. The suitcase wheels bumped down the brick steps with a satisfying clunk. I didn't look back. As the Uber pulled away, I felt the weight of something I couldn't name lift off my shoulders. Aunt Teresa's apartment was small, cluttered with cookbooks and smelling like cinnamon rolls. She opened the door in an apron with a spatula in her hand and eyes full of warmth. "You really came," she said, voice cracking. "Yeah," I managed to say. "I really did." She reached out, hugged me tight. "You're not a disappointment, Madison, not to me." And for the first time in days, I let myself cry. Aunt Teresa's apartment was nothing like home. It was warm, not just in the literal, cinnamon sugar-scented way from the bakery ovens below, but in the way it wrapped around me. Mismatched pillows, hand-sewn curtains, framed photos of friends and failed recipes and memories no one tried to Photoshop perfect. There were no sharp silences here, no comparisons hanging in the air like invisible weights, just the hum of life. The first week in Austin, I could barely sleep. I kept waking up expecting to hear Kayla's music thumping through the walls or Dad's voice criticizing the news. But all I heard was the bakery mixer downstairs and Aunt Teresa humming Landslide as she folded towels in the next room. "You hungry?" she'd ask before I could answer. Always, but not just for food, for direction, for air, for something that felt like mine. Culinary school started on a Thursday. I'd enrolled using the little scholarship money I had left and a promise to myself I wouldn't quit, even if I had to scrub every dish in Austin to afford it. My class uniform was plain: black pants, chef's coat, and a white toque that didn't quite fit my head or my self-esteem yet. I still checked my phone more than I should have, mostly out of habit, partly out of masochism. Kayla had posted 8 news stories since I left. NYC sunrise from the penthouse, smiling face with heart eyes. Mock trial slayed. Judge even said I was intimidating, face blowing a kiss. Brunch with the girls at the Mercer. Who needs boys when you've got mimosas and ambition? I watched them alone, standing by the bakery window with flour on my sleeves. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever wondered where I'd gone, what I was doing. She hadn't texted. Not once. One night, after our first knife skills exam, I came upstairs late to find Aunt Teresa packing a small metal lunchbox with fruit slices, a sandwich, and what looked like one of her famous banana oat cookies. "For tomorrow," she said, not looking up. "You've got that long prep shift at the catering kitchen, right?" I nodded, setting down my school bag. You really don't have to, Madison. She looked at me then, her eyes so gentle they almost hurt. You've never had someone pack your lunch before, have you? I laughed once. Not because it was funny. No, I guess not. She closed the lid with a click. Then let me. I took it from her hand slowly, like it might disappear if I blinked. Don't compare yourself to her, she said, her voice dropping just enough to land in my bones. Kayla walks on the path someone else paved. You're building your own. I looked down at the dented metal box. The tiny hand-drawn note on the lid. A smiley face. My name in loopy letters. Someday, I whispered, more to myself than to her, I'll show them who I am. She patted my shoulder. I already see it. Culinary school was harder than I expected. Not the cooking, though sweating through hours of messy en place with aching feet and blistered fingers wasn't a walk in the park, but the mental marathon of staying focused while my classmates boasted about food tour in Italy or how their dads invested in their restaurant dreams. I had no investors. No backup plan. Just my hands and a dream I wasn't allowed to say out loud yet. Still, I kept going. 6 days a week, I woke up before the sun, tied on my apron and made myself useful. At school, at Teresa's bakery, at the catering company downtown that paid in soggy bills and leftover pasta trays. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time in my life, I was cooking on my own terms. No one sneered. No one laughed when I said I wanted to design nutrition-conscious meals for real working families. No one told me to shrink myself down into something more manageable. And slowly, something began to change. My knife cuts got sharper, my sauces more consistent. I started getting second looks from my instructors. One even pulled me aside after class. You think like a systems engineer in a chef's body, he said. That's rare, I blinked. I was supposed to be an engineer. He smiled. Still are, you're just building flavor instead of bridges. That night, back upstairs in Aunt Teresa's tiny living room, I added a new sticky note to the wall above my air mattress. The others were fading now, quotes, goals, photos Kayla hadn't tagged me in, but this one was fresh. Still an engineer, just building different things. And beneath it, in smaller letters, don't compare, build. It started in the school cafeteria of all places. I was hunched over a battered container of Aunt Teresa's leftover roasted veggie lasagna, too tired to heat it, too broke to buy lunch, when someone sat down across from me and said, "You always eat like you know what's in your food." I looked up mid-bite to see a woman with short curly hair and a clipboard full of sticky notes. She wore a bright yellow sweater and had the kind of energy that made you sit up straighter just by proximity. "I'm Jules," she added, before I could reply. "Third-year nutrition science, I've been watching you." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not creepy at all," she laughed. "No, I mean in class, you cook like someone who understands what bodies need, not just flavor." That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Jules and I started meeting during our shared lunch breaks, tossing around ideas between bites and caffeine crashes. She talked about macros and metabolic triggers. I talked about textures and balance and how nobody wants to eat like a rabbit after a 12-hour work shift. We both knew the problem. Healthy meals were either expensive, bland, or required way too much prep. And most frozen dinners. High-sodium nightmares in plastic trays. So we started brainstorming. What if we could fix that? What if we built something that didn't feel like diet food, but tasted like real comfort? Something your grandmother might make if she also had a degree in molecular nutrition. We started testing prototypes on weekends in a borrowed kitchen Jules' cousin managed out in Round Rock. Our budget was laughable. We reused trays, blended spices in thrifted mason jars, designed labels on a cracked iPad I got for $30 off Craigslist. We named our concept Cure Kitchen. Meals that healed. Not just the body, but shame, fatigue, guilt, the pressure of eating clean in a messy world. I'll never forget the moment it first felt real. It was a rainy Thursday morning when we wheeled our sample coolers into the Austin Local Food Expo. We only had enough stock to last a few hours. Most of the booths around us were glossy and sleek, full of vegan bone broths, mushroom jerky, and brands backed by big money. And then there was us. With our handwritten chalkboard menu and thermoses of flash-frozen gumbo, Thai curry, and Aunt Teresa's chicken pot pie recipe, remastered with anti-inflammatory herbs. At first, people walked past. Then one stopped. Then two. By noon, there was a line. People started snapping pics, tagging us on social media. One woman said, I have IBS and this is the first frozen thing I've eaten in months that didn't make me regret being alive. Another, you guys on Instagram, we weren't. Jules made an account from behind the booth on the spot. But the moment that changed everything came at 3:14 p.m. A man in a gray sport coat, clearly overdressed for a food expo, took one bite of our turmeric chicken and quinoa bake, chewed slowly, and looked me dead in the eye. You've got something big here, he said. Who's your investor? I blinked. You're looking at her. He handed me his card. Just his first name, Liam, and the logo of a wellness tech company I vaguely recognized from a podcast once. Call me Monday. I'd like to offer you 50 to start, on the condition that you don't sell your idea to someone who'll ruin it with fake cheese and celebrity endorsements. I didn't cry. Not then. I kept handing out samples, kept smiling, kept acting like my whole world hadn't just shifted off its axis. But the second I got home and burst through Aunt Teresa's apartment door, the tears came so fast I couldn't even speak. She looked up from frosting cinnamon rolls, eyes widening. What happened? Are you hurt? I shook my head, still gasping. Then I held out Liam's card and whispered, we got funded. She stared at it for a moment. Then she set down the spatula, wiped her hands on her apron, and wrapped me in a hug so tight I felt like a child again. I knew it, she whispered into my hair. I knew they were wrong about you. When I finally pulled away, her eyes were glassy. She never cried, but they sparkled anyway. Your mother called yesterday, she said, handing me a mug of tea. Said Kayla just got invited to a fundraiser with a tech billionaire. I smiled, wiping my eyes. Good for her. Then I opened my laptop, clicked into our new Instagram account, and posted our first official photo. Me and Jules behind our tiny expo table, beaming with sweat-streaked faces and curry-stained aprons. Caption, Cure Kitchen is open for business, built from scratch, flavored with grit. We hit 1,000 followers in a day. And just like that, the world started paying attention. Houston hadn't changed. Same streets I knew by heart, same blinking holiday lights wrapped awkwardly around the old oak trees in our neighborhood, and the same tightness in my chest the second our family's house came into view. Aunt Teresa gripped the steering wheel a little harder than usual as we pulled into the driveway. You don't owe them a performance, she said without looking at me. Just your presence. I nodded. But inside, I felt like I was heading into battle dressed in nothing but an apron and a brave face. Christmas Eve dinner was always a production. Our mother's version of hospitality meant fine china we weren't allowed to breathe near, 2 stiff green beans, and layered casseroles that no one liked but no one dared criticize. This year was no different. Except this time, I didn't sit at the end of the table. This year I sat beside Aunt Teresa, wearing a black sweater I'd bought second-hand with my first order invoice money, and I placed a modest tin of our Cure Kitchen ginger cardamom cookies in the center of the table. Oh, you brought dessert, Mom said, her tone dipped in pleasant condescension. Is this from your little food project? I smiled. Actually, yes, they're selling pretty well online. Kayla looked up from her phone long enough to glance at the tin. Is this that soup thing? Asked, stifling a laugh. The one with the sad little frozen meals. It's not sad, I said evenly. It's a brand, it's called Cure Kitchen. Cure Kitchen, she repeated like it was a punchline. Sounds like something Gwyneth Paltrow would put in a scented candle. Dad chuckled from the head of the table. So you're selling microwave meals now? That's innovative. Oh, Glenn, stop, Mom scolded lightly, patting his arm. I think it's sweet, and who knows, maybe it'll help someone with a cold someday. They all laughed. Even Kayla's new boyfriend, a tan, toothy guy in loafers, grinned like it was a harmless joke. He didn't know me. Didn't know the years I'd spent building something from nothing while his girlfriend took private study breaks in the Hamptons. I didn't say anything, I couldn't. I just stared down at my plate, heart pounding, trying to blink back the tears before they made a fool of me. I thought I'd be stronger by now. I thought success would protect me from this. But somehow, the more I accomplished, the smaller I felt around them. Aunt Teresa, bless her, reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Just once, quiet, steady like a grounding wire. I turned to her, forcing a smile. Just wait, I whispered. She smiled back, her eyes full of something warmer than revenge. It was belief. When dessert came, no one touched the tin of cookies. They passed around store-bought tiramisu and store-bought praise, Kayla talking about her upcoming internship and how brutal finals had been. I wanted to shout, I employ people now. I wanted to say, I'm being featured in Well and Whole next month. I wanted to scream. I raised $50,000 without selling my soul or marrying into it. But I didn't, because they wouldn't hear it anyway. And I didn't come to be heard. I came to remember what silence costs. I left Houston before sunrise. No goodbye breakfast. No awkward hugs. Just Aunt Teresa and me, the highway stretching out in front of us like a quiet promise. I watched the city fade in the rearview mirror and felt something settle in my chest, relief mixed with resolve. Back in Austin, reality didn't slow down for feelings. Cure Kitchen didn't care that my family laughed at me over Christmas. Orders still had to be filled. Labels printed. Recipes tested. Finals studied for. Some nights I changed out of my chef's coat straight into my backpack and headed to class smelling like turmeric and garlic. "You okay?" Jules asked one night as we scrubbed stainless steel counters in the rented kitchen space. It was nearly midnight. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like they were tired too. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She didn't buy it. "Your family again?" I shrugged. "They think I sell soup." Jules snorted. "Then they're idiots." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time since Christmas. We worked like machines, 12-hour days. Frozen fingers from industrial freezers. Burnt forearms. Endless spreadsheets tracking costs down to the penny. Some nights it was just me alone in the kitchen, sealing trays and listening to the hum of the blast freezer. That's when the doubts tried to crawl in. "Who do you think you are? They were right, you should have stayed small. This is temporary, don't get used to it." I'd stop, press my palms against the cold metal counter, and whisper it out loud so the room could hear me. "They don't have to believe in me, I believe in me." And then I'd keep going. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was studying for a food safety exam. Subject, feature request. Cure Kitchen, a health blogger named Rena Morales had tried one of our meals at the expo. She wanted to write about us, not just the food but the story. 2 women. No corporate backing. Functional nutrition without shame. "It's not guaranteed to do anything," Jules warned as I paced the apartment, phone pressed to my ear. "I know," I said, already knowing it would. The article dropped on a Friday morning. By noon, our site crashed. By evening, we had 3,000 new orders and emails from regional grocery chains asking about wholesale distribution. One buyer wrote, "We've been looking for something exactly like this." I sank onto the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, hands shaking. "Aunt Teresa," I yelled. She rushed in, thinking something was wrong. "We're in talks with stores," I said, breathless. "Real ones." She stared at me for a long second. Then she smiled, slow, proud, unbreakable. "I told you," she said softly. "You were always bigger than that table they tried to keep you at." That night, as I updated inventory numbers and pinned a new production calendar to the wall, I realized something important. I wasn't running anymore. I was building. Brick by brick, meal by meal, choice by choice. And somewhere far away, my family was still laughing, unaware that the ground beneath their certainty had already started to shift. It happened slowly, then all at once. One minute I was still packaging meals by hand and juggling finals, and the next, there were lawyers, contracts, NDAs, and meetings that ended with numbers I used to only see in documentaries. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I was halfway through a nutrition lab quiz when Jules burst into the study lounge, waving her phone like it was on fire. "They want to meet," she said breathlessly. "Blue Harbor Wellness." Blue Harbor Mads. My stomach dropped. Blue Harbor was the name in functional food and preventative nutrition. Think Whole Foods, but on steroids and backed by Silicon Valley giants. They'd been watching us quietly for months, apparently. After the health blog, after the regional orders, after we hit 1 million in sales with 0 advertising. And now they were ready to talk. We flew out to San Francisco 2 days later. I wore a blazer that didn't quite fit and heels that pinched, but I kept my back straight and my voice clear as I stood in front of a long conference table of suits and slides and data. "This isn't about trends," I told them. "It's about trust. We're not selling wellness, we're building it." They didn't interrupt once. At the end of the presentation, one of the executives leaned back and said, "Let's talk partnership." The final deal, $100 million in Series A funding. Not a buyout, partnership. We retained control. Jules cried first. I cried later alone, back at the hotel, staring at the skyline like it owed me something. When the press release dropped, it felt like the entire internet woke up. Cure Kitchen trended for 2 days straight. My phone crashed from notifications. I had emails from every media outlet you could name and a few I couldn't. A week later, my face appeared on the cover of Modern Foodie under the headline, "From Freezer to Fortune, Meet the Woman Redefining Wellness Meals." The first time I saw it was at the Austin airport. I was picking up a shipment and turned to see a little girl holding the magazine, tugging on her mom's sleeve. "Mommy, she's the soup lady," the mom smiled. "She's not just soup, baby, she's the boss." And just like that, something in me healed. Not all of it, but something. Back at the apartment, Aunt Teresa had bought 5 copies. "I couldn't decide which picture looked more serious," she said, holding one up. "This one looks like you're about to buy a small country." I laughed, taking it from her. It was surreal, my face, my words, on glossy paper. The girl they said couldn't do anything without a recipe was suddenly being quoted by CEOs. "Can you believe this?" Teresa asked, eyes sparkling. I looked at the headline again, then at her, and whispered, "This is just the start." Because it was, our production facility was already in the works. National distribution was on the horizon. We were launching a grant program for food-insecure communities. I had interns, assistants, a PR team, but I still packed my own lunch every morning. I still tested every new recipe myself. And every night, I still whispered the same thing before I locked the kitchen door. They don't have to believe in me because now the world does. I found out about Kayla on a Tuesday. Not from her, not from my parents. From a clipped, awkward voicemail left by a reporter who'd spelled my name wrong and wanted a comment on the family dispute. I called my father immediately. He answered on the third ring, already irritated. "What do you want, Madison? I'm dealing with enough." "Why is a reporter calling me about Kayla getting expelled?" I asked. "What happened?" Silence, then a scoff. "She made a mistake." "What kind of mistake gets you kicked out of a top business law program?" "She shared notes. Everyone does it." "That's cheating," I said flatly. "She was under pressure," he snapped. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had real expectations placed on you." I laughed once, sharp. That's funny coming from the man who never expected anything of me. In the background, I heard Kayla screaming. "You promised me this would be fine," she yelled. "You said you'd handle it." The line went dead. 2 weeks later, the papers arrived. A lawsuit, filed by my father. The claim was surreal. He alleged that my sudden financial success was the indirect cause of Kayla's distress, that family funds he'd voluntarily spent on her education and failed ventures should be equitably recovered from me. Recovered, as if I were a bank that owed him interest. Jules read it twice. "This is unhinged." Aunt Teresa looked like she might throw up. "He's suing you, his own daughter." I felt calm, cold, even. "Get me my legal team," I said. The courtroom in Houston smelled like old wood and bad decisions. Kayla sat behind my father, eyes red, mascara streaked, no blazer now, just a wrinkled sweater and fury. She wouldn't look at me. When I took the stand, my father didn't either. His lawyer spoke about family sacrifice and unfair enrichment, about how I'd abandoned my roots and profited while others struggled. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. "Did you ever give me money for Cure Kitchen?" my attorney asked. "No." "Did your father invest in your company?" "No." "Did you receive any financial support from your parents after leaving home?" "No." I turned then, finally looking at him. "You told me there was no money," I said. "You told me to stay grounded. Now you want my success to cover your mistakes." He stared straight ahead. The judge didn't take long. "This court finds no basis for the plaintiff's claim," she said crisply. "Case dismissed." The gavel hit like punctuation. Outside, Kayla exploded. "You ruined everything," she screamed at him. "You said she'd never be anything." He didn't answer. I walked past them both, heels steady on marble, heart pounding, but not with fear, with finality. It had been 5 months since the lawsuit. 5 months since the courtroom. Since the headlines. Since the moment I realized that family didn't always mean protection, sometimes it meant survival. Cure Kitchen was now headquartered in Dallas, inside a sleek, renovated brick warehouse that used to house a textile mill. We'd outgrown the little kitchen in Austin and then some. Our glass-walled offices overlooked the production floor, humming with energy and ambition. Everything smelled like herbs and possibility. Most days, I didn't think about Kayla anymore. Until the day she walked through my front doors. Madison," my assistant said gently over the intercom. "There's someone here asking for you. She says her name is Kayla." The pause was heavier than the words. I looked up from the proposal I was reviewing. My first instinct was to say no, but something in my chest said let her. Send her to conference room 2, I said quietly, and stay close. When I walked in, she was already seated. She looked small, not weak, not fake humble, just stripped down. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her tailored blazers had been replaced by an oversized cardigan. Her makeup was gone, and so was the armor in her eyes. She didn't stand. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I didn't sit. You have our parents, she winced. There, not talking to me. I waited. She glanced down, fingers twisting a tissue in her lap. I know I don't deserve anything from you, she said. But I needed to say it. I was wrong. Still, I said nothing. I mocked you, I made fun of your dream, and you were building something real the whole time. I just didn't want to see it. That's true, I said. She looked up, eyes glistening. You were right about Dad, about all of it. He used me, he played us both. Her voice broke slightly. I thought I was the favorite. Turns out I was the investment, one that didn't pay off. I sat then, slowly. Why now? I asked. Why come here? I've lost everything, she admitted. The job offers dried up after the scandal. My name's poison in legal circles. I thought maybe you could help me rebuild, or at least forgive me. I took a breath, watched her, listened to the quiet hum of the room. This was the girl who had laughed at me across dinner tables, who had posted yacht selfies while I packed rice bowls at midnight, who had watched our father sue me and said nothing. And yet, there was something raw in her now, not performative, not entitled, just lost. I don't need an apology, I said. I need a reason to believe this is real. She nodded quickly. Anything. If you mean it, prove it. Kayla blinked. How? I stood. That's not my job to figure out. As I walked to the door, I turned back one last time. This company was built by people who showed up, who did the work. If you want to be part of that story, it starts the same way it did for me, one humble step at a time. She didn't argue, didn't cry, just whispered, okay. And for the first time in our lives, Kayla didn't try to make herself the center of the room. She just stayed there, sitting quietly, trying to figure out how to begin again. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Kayla again. She didn't push, didn't show up uninvited, just sent a short email. Madison, I've been studying. I haven't touched legal texts in months, but I'm catching up. If your offer still stands, I want to earn it. No shortcuts, no ego. I stared at the screen for a long time. I wasn't sure what surprised me more, that she didn't ask for another handout, or that I believed she meant it. The next day, I forwarded the message to our in-house counsel, Rachel, a brilliant contract attorney who'd been with Cure Kitchen since our first real deal. Then I scheduled the meeting. Conference Room 3. Monday, 9:00 a.m. I made sure the table was cleared, the paperwork ready, and that everyone in the room understood. This wasn't charity, it was a contract. When Kayla walked in, she looked different. Not broken this time, not desperate, determined. She wore a navy blazer, not flashy, just clean. Her hair pulled into a tight twist. No makeup, no heels, just a satchel bag under one arm and a used copy of Texas Business Law and Ethics tucked beneath it. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You came prepared. Kayla nodded. I've been reviewing corporate governance policies and nonprofit compliance structures. I also made notes on Cure Kitchen's IP filings. Most of them are solid, but there's a gap in your licensing language for expansion territories. Rachel blinked. I smiled slightly. Sit down. She did. I clicked the presentation screen behind me, showing a document titled, Cure Kitchen Legal Operations Fellowship, Conditional Offer. I'm offering you a 6-month contract, I said, under direct supervision from Rachel and her team. You'll work part-time while preparing for the bar exam. We'll cover a portion of your debt, contingent on 2 things. She swallowed. Okay. 1, you pass the bar within 12 months. Kayla nodded. And the second? You stay. You take over as Director of Legal Compliance once you're certified. But not because we share a last name, because you earn it, every day. The room went still. You're giving me a job? She asked, voice tight, unreadable. I met her eyes. I'm giving you a path. A long pause, the kind that carries everything unsaid. Kayla looked down at the contract, then at me, and she whispered, why? I let the silence sit for a second before I answered. Because someone once told me I didn't have potential. That I should stay small, that I didn't belong in rooms like this. I nearly believed them, and if I had, none of this, I gestured around us, would exist. Her lips parted just slightly. I'm not doing this for you, I added. I'm doing it for the version of us that didn't know better, the ones who thought we had to be chosen, the ones who didn't know we could choose ourselves. Kayla didn't cry. She signed. Rachel collected the papers, scanning them with a satisfied nod. When the room cleared, it was just the two of us again. "You'll be held to every standard," I said. "No favors." "I wouldn't expect any." "I'll watch everything," she nodded. "I hope you do." We stood in silence, old wounds flickering behind new armor. We weren't healed, we weren't friends, but maybe we were finally even, and that was a start. The courtroom was packed, but for once I wasn't on trial. This wasn't a lawsuit, no accusations, no tears behind sunglasses. Just polished shoes, crisp notepads, and microphones pointed at a stage. The Texas Women in Startup Law Summit had invited me to speak months ago. At first, I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't my comfort zone. I liked ovens better than spotlights. I liked plans better than applause. But this time it was different. This time I said yes. And I didn't say yes alone. "Ready?" I asked, adjusting the mic clip to my blazer. Kayla stood beside me, smoothing the sleeves of her tailored navy suit, the same one she'd bought herself after passing the bar 3 weeks earlier. It wasn't borrowed or gifted. It was hers. Like the title she now carried, Director of Legal Compliance, Cure Kitchen Inc., she nodded once. "Let's do this." The event was held in the same downtown Houston courthouse where our father had sued me. I hadn't set foot inside since that day. Now I walked in with my shoulders squared and my company's logo printed behind me. My name, Madison Grace Caldwell, was on the banner alongside Kayla's under the heading, "Sisters, Founders, Fighters." Backstage, a producer handed me a tablet. "Media outlets are live streaming. You're trending already, just a heads up." "Oh," I smiled. "Anyone interesting tuning in?" She hesitated. "Your parents logged into the YouTube stream, both of them." I didn't react. I just said, "Let them watch." The panel moderator introduced us with a brief summary of our journey, glossed with professional polish. Adversity, startup success, family reconciliation. It sounded cleaner than it had lived, but I knew what it had taken to get here. Kayla and I stepped up to the podium together. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. And for the first time, I wasn't there to prove anything. I was there to own it. "My name is Madison Grace Caldwell," I said clearly, voice echoing through the chamber. "When I was 17, I asked my father to help pay for engineering school. He said no. He said I wasn't built for that world." The audience was quiet. And when I left, I had nothing, no money, no approval, just the smell of cinnamon rolls and the hope that Aunt Teresa's kitchen floor wouldn't cave in under my dreams. Laughter rippled through the crowd. I looked over at Kayla. She and I didn't speak for years. Not really. We were rivals in a race we didn't choose. We were daughters in a system that only made room for one of us at the table. Kayla stepped forward then, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. "I was given every advantage," she said, "and I wasted most of them. Until one day, the sister I used to mock turned around and gave me something no one else ever had, a second chance." Murmurs swept through the courtroom. A few heads turned toward the livestream cameras. They knew who we were talking about. We let the silence hang for a moment. Then I finished what I came to say. People love to tell women like us that we have to wait our turn, that we need permission, that we should be quiet, grateful, smaller. I looked into the lens, knowing exactly who was watching. When the doors closed, I built my own. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause wasn't for revenge, it was for arrival. For every woman who'd been told no and turned it into fuel. Kayla smiled beside me. And somewhere in a suburban Houston living room, I imagined my parents watching in stunned silence. Watching the daughter they underestimated become the woman they couldn't define. I didn't need their apology. Their silence was loud enough. The crowd had thinned, but the echo of applause still lingered in the courthouse corridors. I stepped into the quiet backstage hallway, heels clicking softly against marble, letting the weight of the evening finally settle into my shoulders. Not heavy, more like a well-earned coat. One I'd stitched together myself. Kayla trailed a few steps behind, her Cure Kitchen badge slightly askew, the kind of imperfection she would have once obsessed over. But not tonight. Tonight, she let it be. We reached a quiet alcove near the side entrance where the press couldn't follow. She leaned against the wall, arms folded, and stared down at the polished floor. "They still haven't called," she said quietly. "Or texted, or anything." I didn't need to ask who she meant. Our parents had watched the livestream. We'd seen their names flicker briefly in the viewer count before disappearing, like they couldn't decide if it was harder to watch us win or admit they'd been wrong. "They still haven't apologized," Kayla added after a moment. I turned toward her. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. No, I said, they haven't. She looked up, something uncertain in her eyes. Doesn't that bother you? It used to. It used to feel like carrying a wound that would never close unless they said the right words. That their approval, or regret, or even basic acknowledgement would patch something in me that had broken the night my father looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't enough. But not anymore. Let them watch, I said simply. Our success is louder than any sorry. Kayla blinked, then smiled, small, genuine. I still don't know how you did it, she murmured. How you kept going when no one clapped. I shrugged. I stopped performing. We stood there in comfortable silence, the kind we'd never really shared growing up, when everything between us was competition, comparison, or careful avoidance. But now there was space, respect, maybe even something close to peace. A door creaked behind us. I brought cupcakes, Aunt Teresa announced, struggling with a bakery box bigger than her arms. And 2 flutes of cheap sparkling cider because I am not driving across Dallas with an open bottle of champagne in my glove box. Kayla laughed. You always show up with sugar and logic. And you always show up late, Teresa teased gently, handing me a napkin. This one's lemon lavender, don't say I never spoil you. We sank onto the courthouse steps together, 3 women in business wear eating cupcakes under the dull orange glow of security lights. No spotlight. No stage, just us. Kayla wiped a smudge of frosting from her sleeve. You really think this is it, that we've made it? I looked out at the parking lot at the night beyond it. No, I said, I think this is the first time we get to define what it is. Aunt Teresa nodded, her voice soft but sure. This family's real roots, they're right here, not in that old house, not in guilt or tradition, but here, chosen, built, watered with second chances. Kayla leaned against my shoulder. I let her. Because sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet agreement that we won't repeat the past, that we'll plant something better. And maybe that's the apology we never got, but the one we gave ourselves. 5 years later, my name wasn't just known, it was etched in kitchens, boardrooms, and food halls across the globe. Cure Kitchen had gone international, from a tiny food expo booth to shelves in 22 countries. From hand-labeling meals in the back of a borrowed bakery to being featured in Time's most impactful female-led brands of the decade. And yet, nothing made me prouder than where I was standing now. On the same auditorium stage where I'd once received a rejection letter, folded into a scholarship packet meant for someone else. Only this time, I was the one holding the envelope. The sun poured through high glass windows, lighting up rows of young women in navy gowns and trembling smiles. Community culinary graduates, legal interns from our fellowship program, most of them first generation, all of them fierce. I scanned the rows and saw it her. A girl near the back with freckles, knotted curls, and the same quiet fire I'd once hidden under too much modesty and not enough hope. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to get a full-ride grant, tuition, housing, mentorship, everything she needed to turn her kitchen counter dreams into blueprints for something bigger. I cleared my throat into the mic. When I was your age, I began, I asked someone to invest in me. They told me no. They told me to stay grounded. A few girls nodded like they'd heard that too. Turns out, I continued, smiling, being grounded is the best way to build something that lasts. Laughter, soft, warm. I reached into the scholarship folder, pulling out the name and holding it up high. Ariel James, I announced. Cure Kitchen is betting on you, she gasped. The crowd clapped. And somewhere behind the stage, I caught Kayla's proud grin, clipboard in hand, nodding like we'd both done something right. She ran our legal pro bono program now, drafted the grant frameworks, built protections into our scholarship contracts so no corporate hands could ever twist them for PR. She was fierce, fair, and unapologetically meticulous. And no one ever asked if she got the job because she was my sister. Because now, she earned it every day. After the ceremony, Aunt Teresa met us in the hallway with a tray of lemon cupcakes and a Tupperware full of homemade rice balls. She'd flown in from Austin just to sit in the back row, tear up through the whole ceremony, and sneak her food into a building that clearly said no outside refreshments. Tradition, she said, handing me one. Some things you don't outgrow. Some things, I agreed, grinning. We posed for photos with the graduates. Kayla gave her usual half-smile in the group shots and full smile when a student asked her for advice. I stood quietly for a moment, watching them all celebrate, and wondered, what would 17-year-old me say if she saw this? Would she believe it? Probably not. But maybe she'd believe the last thing I said before we ended the day. The words I left them with, the ones I now lived by. Never let anyone tell you what you're worth. They'll find out soon enough.